this is a continuation of the probiotic or reuteri sort of the theme for the time being. So in this case, we're going to look at basically things like for postmenopausal women and bone health. This is a rat model, and the reason will be quite apparent when I actually show it. But in the end, it is a mammalian species, and they do go through. They can actually induce a sort of like a menopausal state through literally severing their ovaries. So that's how they do it, and then they look at what happens, and when they actually give the reuteri strain, then the response. And so how does the body actually react, and how does it improve or not improve or whatever. So let's just get on with it and start sharing the screen. Okay, so this is the actual study. Probiotic or Lactobacillus reuteri treatment prevents bone loss in a menopausal ovariotomized mouse model, which basically means they've severed the ovaries surgically. So no ability to actually produce the, well, you still can get from the adrenals, you can still get some production of estrogen, but basically, your ovaries for the women produce a large amount, and also testosterone as well, which gets converted. So by severing this, you're actually severing the main, you can actually represent something which is similar to a menopausal state in humans in that regard. So that's what they're trying to do. Obviously, you can't do these sort of radical things to humans. So, they're doing extreme things and then seeing, can this actually be beneficial in extreme circumstances? So let's just look at the abstraction for a moment. Let me just zoom in a bit so it makes it a bit easier. Okay, one more. So let's get into the abstraction. Okay. So estrogen, get away from there. So estrogen deficiency is a major risk factor for osteoporosis that is associated with bone inflammation and reabsorption. Half of women over the age of 50 will experience an osteoporosis-related fracture in their lifetime. Thus, novel therapies are needed to combat postmenopausal bone loss. Recent studies suggest an important role for the gut-bone signaling pathways and the microbiota in regulating bone health. Given that the bacterium Lactobacillus reuteri ATCC PTA 6475 reuteri secretes beneficial immunomodulatory factors, we examined if this candidate probiotic could reduce bone loss. So that's the one which is in the Swedish supplement. Okay, so that's the one we're looking at. And the other one actually is really good, as we spoke last time, for pathogens, dealing with those, C. diff and whatever else. But this one is the one we'll focus on today. And this is the supplement that basically I sort of recommend to get it because of the quality. And they also have the patent on this specific one. So most of us out there, if they tell that they are, they probably aren't, or they're basically either bogus or they may be getting it from this company. I don't know the exact relation, and I'm not going to search. It's makes it too complicated. So I would say these people hold the patent, they're more reliable, and you know what you're getting. Simple as that. So we will move on. Anyway, so, and remember, I've already discussed about immunomodulatory factors in regards to this strain, this specific strain. I may do something in the future looking at a number of other pathways in regards to, because there are some other strains that actually are involved in similar pathways of immunoregulation. So I may do a specific one for that at a later stage, probably next year. There's a lot of studies out there, but there's some conflicting stuff, but I'm trying to find better studies that show some level of mechanism where I can really hang my hat on and say, yeah, I can see mechanism here and I'm satisfied. So until that stage, I will just say there is a general beneficial immunomodulatory effect, but when it comes to whole body, we'll examine that at a future date. We examined it, yes, for the bone marrow. Okay, so associated with estrogen deficiency in an over-ectonized, so the OVX stands for that, for the actual removal of the ovaries from mouse menopausal model. So that's radical, pretty much it's not going to be producing much of the hormones that you require to maintain good bone health. So strikingly, reuteri treatment significantly protects OVX mice from bone loss. Osteoclast, bone reabsorption markers, and activator TRAP5 and RNKL, as well as I'll go into all that later. Osteoclastogenesis are significantly decreased in reuteri treated mice, consistent with this reuteri suppressed OVX induced increases in bone marrow CD4 plus T lymphocytes. So we're talking about the T helper cells, okay, which promote osteoclastogenesis and directly suppress osteoclastogenesis. So basically the breakdown. We also identified the reuteri treatment modifies microbial communities in the, and this is something that I've actually talked about, that theme, that because it's fighting against pathogenic bacteria and tends to basically, you could say, these ones tend to actually have a beneficial in rebalancing the gut microbiome. Now, this is where mechanism hasn't been completely and utterly proven. In my eyes, in my heart of hearts, it could be that this modification of the gut microbiome may be the thing that's doing it all, or it could be basically it directly. There's a bit of evidence that it directly does, but I can hang my hat on. But anyway, whether we find out that it does it through one mechanism or multiple mechanisms, that's for further studies down the track. We can't make that a definitive argument at this stage. But at the end of the day, are we getting the results? Yep. Are the bones improving? The density and all that? Yep. So, am I too worried about it? No. In the way, yeah, you got to see it in that sort of way of viewing things. yeah, I sort of, yeah. So that's sort of the way I actually view it. You can't view it in any other way. Anyway, together, our studies demonstrate that L-reuteri treatment suppresses bone reabsorption and loss associated with estrogen deficiency. That's good. So thus, L-reuteri treatment may be a straightforward, cost-effective approach to reduce postmenopausal bone loss. So that's there. And then they provide, we'll go to the data. I'm not really interested in the conclusions. So, and I'm not going to go through every single little detail here. People can check it out for themselves. We'll just go straight to, let's just open up this. The first one, figure 1. And I know what it's doing there. It's basically, just give me a sec. I'll have to come out. Okay. So now, yep, that's it. So otherwise, so this is sort of looking at, it's sort of the, what's it called? Has to do with the what is it, phosphate type, phosphorus, think phosphorus in that regard. So it doesn't really have much of an effect there. And I would say really if you had actually added more protein in there, you can actually improve that part. So I'll leave it at that. When we're looking at this part, this is tumor necrosis factor. So trust me on that, that's what it is. And I mean, you can look it up yourself anyway. And pretty much you can see between the control and the one that's, these both are the ones that have actually had the ovaries snipped out. And basically, as you can see, the tumor necrosis factor, which is cytokines, think cytokines, inflammation, it's come back to baseline, back to the level that you'll find in the control. Well, it's quite high up here in the one that had the, so this one can be sorted out and brought back to normal via increasing meat in that regard. So that deals with that. Because some of these bacteria also, like, some of them are designed more for sugar and some of them more for protein, and that may be because they're using the protein-creating short-chain fatty acid. It's probably reducing the amount of protein. That's probably somebody that's deficient in protein may be an issue, but somebody that's not deficient will get more than enough phosphorus, to basically for their bones. So it's less of an issue, but just keep that in mind. Being osteoporotic and taking this on a protein deficient diet may not help you as much in that regard. So just keep that in mind. We don't have that problem. So osteoclast, which is basically the breaking down of bone, the control is much better. Obviously, the removal of the ovaries basically makes that worse. And this is an improvement statistically. There's not much statistically significant difference between the two. I mean, there's a little marginal difference, but in terms of statistics, it's not. It's noise. So pretty much we can say that the L-reuteri sort of reduced the breakdown of bone, which is good in that regard. Osteocalcin, that is very close to it as well. And there we're talking about, proteins that that are involved in the binding of calcium. Okay, so this has that effect. This one improves it. to closer to the control. So just think that it's actually reducing the effects that they've observed. So we'll move on from that. Okay, and so it's more to look at these because most of the other stuff is more or less the same, similar. So I'm not going to go into all those details. And you can see the difference. Here it's actually much thinner. That is much closer to the control. You know, it's not as, but it's much closer, which is important in that regard. That was another point in this one that I didn't point out quite clearly. Let's just go over this one, which I didn't actually look at. So you got the femur, and that's the thing. That's, you know, the front of your you know, what was it called? You know, your legs are the thigh bone, the thigh, yeah, you know, where that top part, those bones that come from your hips. So those ones to your joints, you know, those ones there. So you can actually see it's improving. So it's not as good as the control, but it's a hell of a lot better than the one that. So then when we look at the vertebrae, which is your back, so your spine, think your spine, you can actually see the spine, you know, one of the vertebrae of the spine. So that's your control. That's basically the one with the actual, the probiotic, and that's the one without. And you can actually see, you know, that is really falling apart. The spine is falling apart. Here, this is improving. So you can imagine somebody who is healthy, they haven't had their ovaries removed, you're going to get good results with this. You will maintain better bone density up to menopausal, much better than many other women. So there's the advantage. And then post-menopausally, you'll be able to maintain fairly good and deteriorate much slower in that regard. Now, maybe if you colonize, because remember this is for a limited period, maybe if you colonize over a longer period of time, these beneficial bacteria, then you could probably see better results over a longer period of time. So I believe that that's more than likely, but we can't say that because most of these studies are done over a limited period of time. We can only say within that period of time. But if that progress is continued in that regard, it should be much better. So we can actually see here the difference actually for those, you know, the thigh bones. You can actually see the L-reuteri even does a bit better than the control, which is, that's a sham. So that's not, you know, like a real, that's just looking at a sham control and all that. So unimportant. This is the real stuff. And we can see in the vertebrae in the back, it's not as good, but it's, you know, very close to. So, and I suspect if that's doing so well for the femur, it probably is doing pretty well also for the hips and stuff like that, all this sort of stuff. So it's probably quite good for that regard. And we know how many hip operations people are doing every year. So it's probably helping all that sort of stuff. Vertebrae is a bit more vulnerable, a bit more easier because of compression of weight and stuff like that. So, you know, but it, you know, at least it's doing much better. Well, that, you know, much better than basically without it. So I would say, you know, general back problems, it should improve back problems as well. You know, it should. So in a healthy person that doesn't have any, you should basically be, you know, really having good spinal health with this. So, well, at least if you're a rat with a 7. Salad boy. He could do with something like this. Sorry, I couldn't actually help myself. Anyway, This is the bone marrow side of things. And T helper cells and stuff like that. As we can see, so that would actually show a bit better. It's not, it doesn't matter. As you can see, these are very close between the control, and that's what you want to see. You want to see similarities. So your immune system and all that, the way, you know, through bone marrow and T cell activation, you want to see it similar to that. You know, when it's a bit too high and all that, that's because of that T, you know, that tumor necrosis factor and other cytokines and other things that are happening. So when you're breaking down, when bone is broken down and not, you know, it's going to create some level of inflammation in the body. It's going to create some stress fractures and stuff like that. So I suspect that's where all this is coming from. So this being very close to control to baseline, that's promising. That not only will you restore bone health, but also you will lower the inflammation associated with that. So well, that is, you know, quite interesting. That is actually happening. So I'm not going to go through the rest. People want to check it themselves. I just want to touch on the key points of the benefits of basically, you know, as I said, seeing is believing. You know, you don't have to look at that. You don't have to look at your femur. You don't have to look at your spine. And if you can get these sort of results as a postmenopausal woman, or even a male, this would have benefits in a male as well, because, you know, it's helping those similar pathways for, you know, to maintain good bone health, and working against the pathways that are, you know, pulling you apart. But women tend to have higher levels than men in terms, because of the postmenopausal state. But also my sort of personal belief is, I'll just stop that, my personal belief is that the modern lifestyle and diet and all that have a lot to answer for as well. These bacterial strains are found primarily, the reuteri, the rhamnosus, all these sort of strains that are beneficial are primarily found in meat products, in meat, in all animals. You go around in nature, animals, so when you hunt an actual animal, you will find these things in there. So those are the bacteria that have been with us for a very long time. Those are the bacteria which we've decimated because of the modern food environment, and which is basically glyphosate rich, which acts as an antibiotic, and overuse of antibiotics. But primarily, we're not consuming antibiotics every single day. It's primarily the glyphosate element that is driving a lot of this, or people spraying Roundup, which is what it's called in Australasia, around their place. That's what's basically reducing these beneficial bacteria, and as a consequence is creating these gut microbiome imbalances with deleterious effects to our general health. So, and one of these deleterious effects are more accelerated bone loss and an explosion since, you know, in the last couple of decades, an explosion in osteoporosis, hip fractures, hip surgery. You go back before the overuse of antibiotics and before glyphosate, people were still consuming some carbohydrates, probably not as high as they do today, but they were still consuming a number of these things. The level of bone problems that we have today were not that pronounced. So there is an issue there that, you know, we're starting to learn more and more about the gut microbiome, its interaction, specific species that are more prominent in a species-appropriate diet. So I think those are driving factors. When people don't eat a species-appropriate diet, they're not getting enough of those. And when they're eating a species-inappropriate diet, especially laden with a lot of, you know, sort of antibacterial, also antibiotic type of factors that are killing off a number of those beneficial bacteria and giving rise to the pathogenic, it may explain the explosion in gut problems, in gut permeability, in histamine intolerance, too much overexpression of histamine, rather than the sort of the normal, because you need a certain level of histamine. It is normal, a normal physiological level. Too low is unhealthy, too high is a problem as well. So don't listen to crackpots that tell you you need to take medication to lower histamine too low. If you do that, you'll create other health problems. I recently did a bit of a chat with Pim, and I've actually discussed that, so I'll leave it for that. You can actually watch the chat that I had with Pim that covers some of this information. But just to say that, to continue the theme of certain probiotic strains that basically have benefit in dealing with these bone issues. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and see yous.